My name is Detective Pierce. I have walked into crime scenes slick with blood, cellars filled with silence more crushing than any scream, and houses where every shadow held something waiting. Yet none of it prepared me for the swamp. They call it Marrowfen. Locals spit the name like a curse, eyes narrowing as if saying too much might draw it nearer. The reports that reached my desk were tangled, contradictory: missing hunters, vanished surveyors, whole groups swallowed by fog. The only detail that remained constant, retold in whispers across towns and villages, was the light. A procession of pale lanterns gliding across the marsh each night, bobbing like distant fishermen, yet never approached without consequence. Those who followed them were never seen again. It was late autumn when I arrived. The train station sat 20 miles from the swamp itself, the last stop before wilderness took hold. From there I hired a motorcar into the village of Hallows Reed, the nearest settlement to the fen. The driver, a gaunt fellow with hands as thin as twigs, said little. Only once, as the dirt road narrowed and the air grew damp with rot, did he speak. "You'll hear them before you see them. That's the trick." "What kind of sound?" I asked. He gave me a look that was almost pity. "Lanterns don't make sound, detective. Not unless they're carried." The village was small, fewer than 50 houses, each leaning on the other like drunkards. Moss devoured their roofs, windows sat black as eyes punched out. Smoke rose from only a few chimneys. Children did not play in the streets, dogs did not bark. It felt less a village and more a place clinging to its last heartbeat. At the inn, little more than 2 rooms above a grocer's, I met my first contact, a woman named Clara Fenwright. She'd written to the city council claiming her brother had gone missing in the swamp while chasing the lanterns. Her face bore the hollow look of sleepless nights, eyes bruised by grief. "You won't find him," she said, voice flat. "Not him, not the others. The swamp keeps what it takes." "You asked for an investigation," I reminded her. "Yes. Not for his sake. For ours." Her hands trembled as she poured tea either of us drank. "If someone doesn't stop it, there won't be a village left. They'll keep walking out there, drawn like moths." That night, I joined a group of villagers at the marsh's edge. They gathered on a ridge overlooking the black expanse of water and reeds. The air stank of rot and stagnant mud, sweet and suffocating. The moon hung pale as bone above. We waited. At first, nothing. Just wind sighing through reeds tall as men. Then the fog stirred, rolling low and thick. From within its folds a glow. One, then another. Then a dozen. Pale spheres drifting above the mire, each one haloed by mist. They swayed as though carried by invisible hands. The villagers crossed themselves, some muttering prayers. Clara gripped my sleeve. "Don't look too long," she hissed. The lights moved in lines, orderly, like a procession of mourners. I felt a pull, not physical, but insidious, the way sleep tugs at a weary mind. My eyes stung, yet I couldn't look away. One of the men, a farmer, broke from the group. He stumbled down the slope, boots sinking into muck. His wife screamed after him, but he didn't pause. His gaze was fixed on the nearest lantern, his body moving with jerky certainty. I lunged to stop him, but the others grabbed me. "No!" Clara's voice was sharp. "You can't follow. If you do, it has you too." The farmer vanished into fog. His wife wept, clawing at her own face as if to tear the vision from her eyes. The lights swelled brighter, pulsing like breath. I could swear I saw silhouettes in that glow, figures beneath the lanterns, faces blurred, arms outstretched. A funeral march without end. When the fog thinned, the lanterns were gone. So was the farmer. Only the swamp remained, its surface unbroken, as though it had swallowed both without ripple. The villagers dispersed quickly, refusing to speak. Clara lingered, her jaw set tight. "Now you understand," she whispered. "The swamp doesn't kill. It invites. And once you're invited—" Her voice trailed off into the dark. I stood there, the smell of rot filling my lungs, my hand still trembling where it had tried to catch the man. I could not shake the feeling that he hadn't walked to his death. He had walked home. And the swamp had welcomed him. That was the first night. The beginning. But the lanterns would return. And next time, I would follow. The second night, I couldn't resist. The village tried to dissuade me. Old men spat at my boots and warned me I would never return. A woman clutched my sleeve and begged me to leave before sundown. Even Clara, who had called me here, sat rigid in the corner of the inn, refusing to meet my eyes. "You'll end up like the rest," she said at last. "You think you'll walk in with purpose, with reason. But the swamp knows every path. It knows how to unravel you." "I'm not here to be unraveled," I told her. But I wasn't sure I believed it. At dusk, I packed my lantern, compass, revolver, and notebook. I wore high boots, though the innkeeper muttered that leather wouldn't save me from what lived under the mud. The villagers gathered again at the ridge, silent as statues. I didn't join them. I went alone, stepping off the slope into the black reeds. The swamp sucked at my boots, every step heavy. Mosquitoes whined near my ears, and unseen creatures stirred the water. The fog thickened fast, rolling low over the mire, hiding the ground so I could never be certain where I placed my feet. Soon the ridge and the village disappeared behind me. I was alone with the stink of rot. Then I saw them. Lanterns. Pale, flickering, drifting just ahead, their glow trembling across the water. My heart quickened. I lit my own lamp, its warm flame sickly compared to their cold fire. I pushed deeper, reeds brushing my coat, mud sucking harder. The swamp seemed endless, every turn the same. The lanterns moved in lines, always just out of reach. I tried to mark my path, breaking reeds or scratching bark, but the fog swallowed my markers, and when I glanced back, the way was always gone. I stopped to breathe. That's when I heard it. Voices. Low, murmuring, indistinct, as though carried by the lanterns themselves. A chorus, neither mournful nor joyous, but steady. I couldn't understand the words, if they were words at all. My hand tightened around the revolver. The lights drifted closer. Shapes formed behind them. My breath caught. It was people. Dozens of them, their outlines blurred by mist. They walked slowly, each carrying a lantern that glowed brighter than fire, brighter than any oil or wick could burn. Their faces were pale, eyes hollow, skin damp and glistening. Their mouths moved in unison with the murmur I heard. One passed within 10 feet of me. I froze, my lantern shaking in my grip. It was the farmer from the night before. His eyes were wide and glassy, his face slack. Yet he moved with purpose, as if he knew every step. The lantern in his hand gave off no heat. "Samuel," a voice whispered. Clara's voice. I spun around. The mist swirled, but no one was there. Only the procession. I stumbled forward, trying to reach him, but the ground gave way beneath me. I plunged waist deep into black water, foul and cold. Something slick brushed against my leg. I thrashed, hauling myself out onto a tangle of roots. When I looked up, the procession was gone. But one lantern remained. It floated on the water a few yards away, bobbing gently. My pulse hammered as I reached for it. The air turned heavy, the stink of rot so thick it burned my nose. I touched the lantern. It was solid. Wood and glass. But inside it was no flame, no wick. Only a swirling, pale mist that seemed alive, pressing against the glass like breath. The instant I lifted it, silence fell. Not the quiet of night, but a silence that smothered even thought. The swamp froze. The fog stood still. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. The farmer stood there, lanternless, his eyes black pits, his mouth stretching open far too wide. He whispered one word. Return. My hand shook on the revolver. But before I could move, he stepped back into the fog and vanished, leaving me alone with the stolen lantern, its pale glow staining my skin. I should have dropped it. I should have run. Instead, I carried it back with me. That night, in the inn, Clara refused to touch it. She stared at me as though I had smuggled death itself inside. "You've made a mistake," she said. "Now it will come looking for you." I didn't sleep. The lantern sat on the table by my bed, glowing softly. And sometimes, when the room was quiet enough, I swore I could hear the swamp breathing through it. I woke with a start. The lantern hadn't gone out during the night. It burned with its ghostly pallor, as if it needed neither oil nor flame. The pale light painted the walls of my rented room with shapes that writhed when I wasn't looking straight at them. Downstairs, the inn was nearly empty. The innkeeper avoided my eyes, pouring coffee with hands that trembled. Clara sat in the corner again, her face drawn, her gaze fixed on the floorboards. When I set the lantern on the table, she flinched as though I'd laid a corpse between us. "You brought it back," she whispered. "You saw me leave with nothing," I said. "You saw me return with this. Does it frighten you because of what it is, or because of what it means?" Her lips tightened. "It means the swamp has already marked you. The lantern is not yours to carry. It belongs to the procession." The villagers were whispering too. I could feel their eyes on me from the far corners of the room, the street outside, even beyond the glass. They glanced at the lantern with unease, muttered words I couldn't catch, then looked away before my gaze caught theirs. I spent the day asking questions, but no one wanted to answer. Every mention of the swamp was deflected with mutters or the sudden need to be elsewhere. When pressed, one farmer leaned in close and hissed, "That light will hollow you. Same as it did the others." Then he turned and fled. By dusk, I had learned nothing except this: the villagers weren't just afraid of the swamp. They were afraid of me. That night, I decided to test the lantern. I set it in the center of the room, turned down every other lamp, and waited. The pale glow was steady, pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat. I reached to open the glass, then stopped. Something inside it shifted, as if aware of my hesitation. The air grew heavy. A soft scratching sound filled the walls, a faint scrape like nails against wood. I stood quickly, revolver in hand, listening. The sound grew louder, surrounding me. Then I saw it. Shadows, not cast by the lantern but moving toward it. They seeped from the corners of the room, thin as threads, gathering around the pale glow. They bent toward it like flowers reaching for the sun. And then, all at once, they pulled back. The room fell silent. When I dared to breathe, I noticed Clara standing in the doorway. Her eyes were wide, her hands white-knuckled on the frame. "I told you," she whispered. "It doesn't just shine, it calls." I asked her what it was calling. She only shook her head, refusing to speak further. But later, when she thought I'd gone to sleep, I heard her murmuring to herself outside the door. "The procession will come. They always come for their own." That night, I dreamed of the swamp. Of hundreds of lanterns drifting through endless fog, and a figure walking at their head. It was taller than any man, its face shrouded, its hands bone-thin. When it lifted its lantern, all the others bent toward it in reverence. And in the dream, I was holding one of their lanterns too. But mine didn't glow pale, it glowed red. When I woke, the lantern beside my bed flickered once, as if in agreement. Morning came with a fog so dense it smothered the village. Even the church steeple seemed swallowed by the gray. The lantern still burned by my bedside, patient as ever, as if it knew what I would do. I packed lightly, notebook, revolver, and the lantern itself. Clara was waiting outside the inn. She didn't protest my plan, only followed at a distance, her eyes always scanning the mist as though expecting something to emerge. The swamp began where the fields ended. A ragged line of cypress and waterlogged pines marked the threshold, and the air grew colder, thicker. The lantern pulsed faintly in my hand, almost guiding my steps. I tried to shake the thought, but every fork in the trail, every decision of direction, it seemed to tug me along. Hours passed with no sign of wildlife, not even birds. The silence was so deep it pressed on the eardrums, broken only by the occasional drip of water. We reached a clearing where the ground dipped into a stagnant pool. A dozen wooden posts jutted from the muck, each wrapped in rotting cloth. "Shrines," Clara said quietly. "They built them for the procession." As we approached, the lantern flared brighter. Shadows flickered beneath the water's surface, coiling and dispersing when I leaned closer. I had the sense that if I stared long enough, the shapes would resolve into faces. We pressed deeper into the swamp. Roots snared our boots, and the mist grew so thick it clung to our clothes. The lantern's glow was the only color in that pale world. Then ahead I saw it, faint lights scattered through the trees, swaying in unison. "The procession," Clara whispered, her breath trembling. At first I thought they were men carrying lanterns. But as we crept closer, I saw they weren't men at all. Each figure was thin, elongated, draped in wet cloth that clung to their frames. Their heads were bent forward, faces hidden. They walked in perfect silence, their lanterns bobbing in rhythm. I counted, 12, then 20, then more than I could grasp. An endless line, vanishing into the mist. And leading them was the figure from my dream, tall, skeletal, its lantern casting no light at all but still guiding the others. Clara tugged my sleeve. "We should go." But the lantern in my hand flared crimson, just as it had in my dream. And every head in the procession turned toward me. They stopped walking. One by one, the figures began to move closer, their feet not breaking the surface of the water but gliding above it. I raised the revolver, but Clara caught my wrist. "Don't," she hissed. "They don't bleed." The tall figure at the front raised its lantern high. The mist shifted, curling around us. My breath caught as the ground seemed to drop away beneath my boots. Suddenly I wasn't standing in the swamp, I was somewhere else. The air was dry, the soil cracked, lanterns burning all around like stars pinned to the earth. Rows and rows of them, endless. And in the center of that field stood a black pit, so deep the light couldn't reach its bottom. The procession encircled it. Clara clutched my arm, whispering prayers under her breath. The tall figure beckoned me forward. Its arm moved with deliberate slowness, bones shifting beneath its pale skin. I realized then, the lantern had not guided me into the swamp. It had delivered me to them. When I looked into the pit, I saw something staring back. Not with eyes, but with hunger. A hollow that pulled at thought itself. And then a voice, not Clara's, not my own, whispered inside my skull. "Return what is ours." The lantern grew heavy in my hand, the glass trembling. The light within thrashed like a trapped animal. Clara's grip tightened. "Don't let it go," she whispered fiercely. "If you give it back, you'll never leave." But the weight grew unbearable. My knees shook, my fingers numb. The procession took a step closer. The air filled with a sound like distant bells, tolling deep in my bones. I was being asked to choose, surrender the lantern, or keep it and bear whatever fate followed. The weight of the lantern dragged me downward, as though chains had been fastened to my wrists. The procession closed in, 100 faceless figures surrounding the pit. The air shimmered with their silent demand. Clara's voice cut through the oppressive stillness. "Don't let them take you. That's what they want." The tall figure raised its lantern higher. Its flame was black, but it burned all the same, casting shadows that bent unnaturally across the cracked soil. The faceless beings swayed with the rhythm of that light, their movements synchronized like puppets. I staggered back, but the ground behind me sloped toward the pit. The pull was stronger now, tugging at the core of my being. For a moment I nearly let go. The lantern in my hand pulsed violently, and I saw visions: villagers swallowed by fog, lanterns extinguished one by one, a swamp where no dawn ever came. That was their promise. If I returned the flame, the procession would reclaim what it had lost. But the cost would be everything else. I forced myself to straighten. My voice came out hoarse, but it carried across the circle. "This isn't yours. Not anymore." The moment the words left my mouth, the pit roared like a furnace. The faceless figures shuddered violently, their forms unraveling like smoke. The tall leader stepped forward, its lantern guttering. It extended a skeletal hand, reaching for me, not in violence, but in desperation. I raised my own lantern high. The light burst outward, brighter than any flame I'd ever seen. It seared through the mist, dissolving the swaying figures into ashtray fragments that blew away on a phantom wind. The tall figure shrieked without sound, a hollow gape that stretched too wide. Its black lantern shattered, and it crumbled into the pit, vanishing into the dark. The ground trembled. I thought the earth would split open beneath me. But instead, the pit collapsed inward, folding upon itself until there was nothing left but marshy soil and the faint glow of morning mist. When I blinked, I was standing back in the swamp. The lantern in my hand was quiet now, its flame steady, warm. The procession was gone. Only Clara and I remained. She stared at me with wide eyes. "You did it," she whispered, though she sounded uncertain, as if she wasn't sure whether we'd survived or only crossed into another layer of the nightmare. We staggered back through the swamp in silence. The mist was thinner now, sunlight pressing through the canopy for the first time since I'd arrived. Birds called in the distance. Life had returned, faint but present. At the edge of the village, Clara finally spoke again. "Keep it with you," she said, nodding toward the lantern. "If you leave it here, it'll all start again." I wanted to argue, to throw the cursed thing into the marsh and let the mud bury it forever. But the flame inside flickered once, almost in warning. So I kept it. By the time I reached the inn, the sun was burning away the last of the fog. To the villagers, it was just another morning. To me, it was survival. In the quiet of my room, I set the lantern on the table. Its glow painted the walls in shades of amber, calm and unassuming. But in the stillness of that moment I could swear I heard bells tolling faintly, far away, but closer than I would ever want them to be. I wrote in my notebook. Case concluded. The lantern swamp holds its silence again, but the flame remains with me. I fear the procession is not gone, only waiting. And as the ink dried, I realized the truth. The lantern was no longer just theirs. It was mine. And whatever followed, I had already chosen to carry it.